Evelina mai kako, and welcome to the Hawaiian Kingdom podcast. Evelina mai kako, and welcome to the Hawaiian Kingdom podcast.
What if one of the most important stories in Hawaiian history isn't what happened in 1893, but what happened afterward? What if the documents, the treaties, the diplomatic correspondence, and the international legal record tell a story most people have never heard? Today's guest has spent more than 3 decades helping Hawaii's next generation investigate those questions for themselves. Dr. Umi Perkins is one of Hawaii's most influential historians and educators. Since 2002, he has taught Hawaiian history at Kamehameha schools at Kapalama, helping educate generations of students while also serving as a lecturer in political science and peace studies at the University of Hawaii. He holds a master's degree in government from Harvard University, a PhD in political science from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, was a Fulbright scholar to Aotearoa, New Zealand, and is widely recognized for his scholarship on Hawaiian land tenure, Kuleana rights, and political history. For decades, Dr. Perkins has challenged audiences to move beyond assumptions, return to actual historical records themselves. Through his teaching, research, public lectures, and curriculum development, he has inspired thousands to examine Hawaiian history through original documents, Hawaiian language sources, and global perspectives. Most recently, he has helped create a space and conversations with internationally recognized scholars, including Professor Federico Lenzerini, one of the world's most leading experts in international law, self-determination, human rights, helping expose Hawaii's students and communities to some of the most important legal discussions taking place today. Whether you agree with him or disagree with him, Dr. Perkins has dedicated his life to asking difficult questions, encouraging critical thinking, and helping Hawaii better understand the past so it can better shape its future. Please welcome Dr. Umi Perkins.
Hey, mahalo. Mahalo for that.
I'm really excited to get started today. Is there anything you would like to add to your introduction?
I'll just add one thing, and I've been talking about this more and more recently, and that is even though I did grow up in Hawaii until age 9, my family moved to Tonga, Kingdom of Tonga, when I was 9, and I lived there until I was 14. And if you think about those years, those are kind of very formative years. And it's sort of come full circle in a way. I returned to Tonga this past November, and it really got me thinking about the ideas of constitutional monarchy and how it works in the real world, not just in an imagined, if we sort of imagine what it might be like today, but we have an example of a real functioning constitutional monarchy in Polynesia. And all those things kind of came back into my mind, and I just bring that up to kind of background, how I turned out the way that I did. There was a very much formative for me, kind of shaped who I became. And in fact, I talked about Tonga at the 133rd observation of the overthrow at the palace on January 17th, and also to the Kamehameha faculty in that same month. And so that's maybe some people do know that, but kind of something you don't know about me and my background.
That is beautiful. Yeah, Tonga, I don't think a lot of people realize, is a constitutional monarchy. And I believe that the Hawaiian Kingdom helped inspire their own constitution. They celebrated recently, is that correct?
That's right. When I was there in 2025, it was the 150th anniversary of the Constitution. There had been a mistake in the history that Lawrence Gonshore actually uncovered that they had said that Tonga's constitution was based on the constitution of 1852 of the Hawaiian Kingdom.
Mm.
But that doesn't really make sense if they're adopting a constitution in 1875. Why wouldn't they look at the most up-to-date constitution of Hawaii, which was 1864?
64.
And in fact, it seems that that's what they did. If you read the two
Mm.
side by side, they are almost identical. You could call it plagiarism, maybe, but I always say that jokingly because Polynesians don't really have the idea of plagiarism, at least at that point, and they're just thinking about Tonga is looking at Hawaii, which is kind of ahead of the curve, and does this work? And it does seem to work. But the things that they thought didn't work, those are the things that they changed, and it was about land tenure in particular. Actually, and we see today Tonga has a quite different land tenure system than Hawaii, but most of the rest of it was very close, if not identical.
Mm. As a Hawaiian scholar that understands, the Hawaiian Kingdom as a power in the world that had influenced countries like Tonga, where you grew up, what would you say is the saddest part of your knowledge of the Hawaiian Kingdom's influence and the Kingdom of Tonga?
Just that phrase alone, which is the title of Lawrence Gonshar's book, A Power in the World, that has pretty much been lost over the many, many decades and more than a century. Um, this gets into sort of what academics might call the imaginary about Hawaii and how people imagine Hawaii. It's often seen as part of the Western United States and a little annex of Southern California. And if you were to come here, you wouldn't, you couldn't be blamed too much for thinking that. It's very much modeled on the California system, which often doesn't make sense, the freeway system and things like that. It doesn't make sense here. That's why we have
Like what?
the system doesn't work that well.
Yeah, right.
But then if you really take the time to look back, you see quite a different system. And I have to spend quite a bit of time in class to explain really the basic differences between the system that we appear to be in and a monarchical system,
Mm.
right? The way that the heirship goes down by bloodlines, and what happens if a bloodline ends. And then you add the factor of elected monarchs, which makes it even more interesting. Um, so some time gets used up in class on, and it's very productive time, but for me, having studied this a long time, it can be frustrating that I have to do these kinds of it's almost like remedial work that we should already know these things.
Mm.
But I think because of teaching mainly high school and even in college, I mainly teach freshmen.
Mm.
Um, my approach has always been to assume people know very little
Mm.
or even nothing, and so I tend to use metaphors that are easy to understand using basic logic, and I think that's been some of the appeal of my work that's made it more relatable and that and it's helped it get out there more because I I don't use a lot of jargon,
Mm.
or if I do, I explain it, and that comes from working with fairly young students and trying to explain fairly high level concepts. But the difference between a monarchy and a republic, sort of federated state system, is not something we should even be having to worry about at this point, but we still do. So that's one of the sad parts of um, Hawaii no longer being in reality a power in the world as it used to be.
Mm. That's beautiful. I remember reading his book, and there was a map he found, I believe in Germany, that had, I want to say it said Reich Kamehameha,
Yeah,
which means kingdom, Kamehameha's kingdom. But there were only so many countries, I believe, in the
yeah,
Pacific at the time, and the Hawaiian Kingdom was one of them. And that
right.
Constitution of 1864 influencing Tonga's constitution, Um, do you feel in a way, because I hear this a lot in Polynesia that, they kind of look down on Hawaiians for not understanding our language. But do you feel in a way that the Hawaiian kingdom's consulary in Tonga that helped them modernize to gain that constitution protected the Tongan language and their national, their to be an Aboriginal monarchy today?
So the consular connection there, and Lorenz could explain that better than I can, but it was the Hawaiian consul in New South Wales, Australia.
Hmm.
He met with the entourage of the King of Tonga at the time, who's kind of like their version of Kamehameha. It's George Tupou the First,
Oh, Mike.
and they're currently on George Tupou the Sixth. So
Wow.
this is the current dynasty, the beginning of the current dynasty. Uh, he's the one who you could say unified the current formation of what constitutes Tonga now.
Hmm.
So he's really like their Kamehameha, George Tupou the First. He went to Australia, and it might not have been him personally, but they were in contact with the Hawaiian consul in Australia, who was a European, and they got a copy of the Constitution there. And then
Australia.
George
Wow.
Tupou took it back to Tonga and then eventually modified it slightly and then adopted it. Um, in the words of the great Tongan historian um, who wrote the book the Tongan Constitution in 1975, which was the 100th anniversary,
Hmm.
he said the first section followed the Hawaiian Constitution closely. And then there was a second section which also followed the Hawaiian Constitution very
Very
closely.
close.
So that's how he kind of phrased it, which I
Yeah,
take to mean, basically almost word for word in many places.
that's fantastic. Do you think if more people in Tonga knew Hawaii's plight of being occupied without a treaty of annexation, um, that maybe they would come to the aid of people like you that are teaching occupation versus annexation, since we truly know that it wasn't a legal thing that happened?
Yeah. We've talked about this a little bit before, but I'll tell you there's two sides to the answer. So on the one hand, I've been told by the head of the university where my parents taught in Tonga
Mm.
that that Hawaiian sovereignty is the only left-wing cause that the King of Tonga believes in.
Wow.
He's otherwise like an ultra-conservative monarchist, and you can kind of understand
Hmm.
that would be. But there is a sense of people from monarchical lines around Polynesia
Hmm.
networking together.
Right.
Somebody who I met in Tonga, a pretty amazing person, told me that he was involved with getting together the royal lines of Fiji, Hawaii, um, Tahiti, and New Zealand. They have the Kingitanga system in New Zealand.
Hmm.
And this is a sort of a way of networking. I've seen this before.
Right.
So that's one side of the answer is that there's this a sort of a generalized support for the plight of Hawaii.
Hmm.
But on the other hand, I've had some of the my classmates who I went to elementary school with.
Hmm.
I was in Tonga because it was the English speaking elementary and just by virtue of that, it happened to be Tongans who'd been raised abroad was most of the students there.
Okay.
And part of that happened to be Tongans from quite elite families. So
Hmm.
at least two of my classmates ended up in very high level government positions. So one of them is has the title of Lord Privy Seal.
Oh, wow.
So if you look at the on the Hawaiian treaties and have those
Yeah,
stamps,
yeah, that's stabs.
um, his job is to make sure that that seal is always in the right hands And it's maybe the highest position that a commoner can have in Tonga. But
Wow.
he was a commoner. My other friend, my other best friend, that's one of my best friends. The other one was in the House of Lords. So
Wow.
he House of Nobles, and he's called Lord.
Mm.
So if I were to ever interact with him in person again, I'd have to call him my lord, which is just
Yeah, no, that's
playmate from elementary. We were like nothing.
right.
Um, but we all knew at the time that he was the heir to that
That
noble
time.
title. And there were only 13 nobles in Tonga.
Okay. Do
Yeah.
you know how many the Hawaiian Kingdom had in the House of Nobles? Was it?
Uh,
It was about that, no?
Around there, maybe
Yeah.
9 to 12, 9 to 15. I should know
Yeah.
this.
No, it's okay.
For reference, it's all in John Osorio's book,
Mm.
Lahui. He's got lists of multiple legislatures as to show the changes that happened where it was more and more Caucasians in there.
Would you recommend that book to people that are kind of new to the subject, like maybe Tongans out there that are like, whoa, the Hawaiian Kingdom's occupied? And I think our royal seal was kind of like this on the stamp, wasn't it? Kind of like the twins, I believe, when they did their letters, or
It's
something.
hard to see on the treaties and pictures of the treaties, which I show every semester.
Right, 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 right.
I would imagine it is. But I was to continue on with my friends. I've been in touch with them while we were adults and they were in those positions, and I found them to be not supportive
Mm.
of what I was saying. So one of them referred me to the kind of UN Coalition for Small States, which
Oh,
was run by the representative of Nauru.
oh.
If you know about Nauru, Nauru is it's a microstate to such an extent that it's almost like it doesn't exist.
Mm.
It's used as a guano mine, so there's hardly any
Oh.
people there. So, you know, he's referring me to Nauru and states like that. Tonga is too big to be in that. Hawaii is 10 times the size of Tonga, or 15 times the size,
Yeah, yeah.
14 times the size of Tonga. So
Huge.
that was a weird thing to do. And then this guy definitely knows better. He's very, very well educated, and
Mm. Interesting.
my nobility friend, who sadly is had passed away actually.
Oh, sorry to
Um,
hear that.
yeah, he was pretty straight up dismissive in sort of a way of we have it, you don't kind of sense.
Mm.
Um, but part of that is that Tongan society is extremely conservative.
Mm.
You don't ever want to get on the bad side of the king.
Sure.
Uh, so to be very real about this, Tonga has occasionally been in some level of trouble for being not democratic.
Mm.
And so at the time that I was living there, it was George Tupou the Fourth was king,
Mm.
and the sort of saying about town was it was that Tonga was an absolute monarchy disguised as a constitutional monarchy.
Mm.
But I would say that that's not true anymore, or at least it's much less true
Mhm.
because developments had happened since the passing away of that monarch that the democracy movement has made small incremental changes to be a little bit more democratic, and that there are some constraints on the king now.
Right.
Yeah. So there's just some realpolitik, as we would call it, of
Yes, yes, I'm up to date.
constitutional
Um,
monarchical
and,
government.
and and just so everyone knows, this is the Hawaiian Kingdom podcast, but it's interesting that
Hmm.
once we're learning about the Hawaiian Kingdom as a power in the world and how it's influenced other countries around, the Pacific, I think it was over 90 embassies and consulates, is that correct?
Right.
That we're able to actually have very deep conversations about the relationships with these places. And that's, I think, one of the most exciting parts of the research that you do and other scholars is to highlight, what this forgotten country was and how it influenced. It really makes me proud to be a Hawaiian subject and Hawaiian when I hear about the influence for good I don't know if it was King Tuopo, but I believe Lawrence Gunter and we had talked about Kalakawa's warship, and it was a Kaimi Loa.
right?
Was that Tuopo aboard?
No, that one went to Samoa.
Oh, that was Samoa to ward off
Yeah.
Germany, right? I believe. Was it something like that?
I think there were Germans aboard helping
Mm,
the diplomatic mission. So that's an interesting one because in the kind of received history, which is mainly based on Kuykendall, who we can talk about, Ralph Kuykendall's book, The Hawaiian Kingdom, three
mm,
volumes, like somewhere around 1,500 pages of history there. It's really made out to be this debacle and that they were all drunk half the time,
wow.
and really bad timing because the kind of high chief of Samoa, Malietoa,
Oh yeah, Mele.
thrown while they're there. So they had made a treaty with him, but then he's overthrown, so the treaty is null and void.
Mm,
Um, and that was an attempt to make a Pacific Confederation.
mm,
Uh, and Samoa seemed to be amenable. So speaking of
mm.
Hawaii as a power in the world, it's often forgotten that Hawaii was the wealthiest country in the Pacific, excluding New Zealand and Australia, which were not independent countries at the time. Um, and so other Polynesian societies would have been aware of that Hawaii is really the regional power. So you can think of it like that, the regional power. And and a lot of people now don't know what a confederation looks like. What they were trying to do was to make Kalakaua to be like Queen Victoria, who is, if you look at her actual title, it reads something like Queen of the United Kingdom and Empress of India
Mm,
and Empress of a number of other colonies. So you can be king and emperor.
mm.
And then there can be kings in your empire who are still kings, but they're under you as an emperor. So if this had gone through, Kalakaua would have been King of Hawaii and Emperor of the Pacific, and then
Interesting.
whatever islands were under that um,
That
confederation.
interesting.
So it's an unusual arrangement. In an American context, you don't think of it those things this way. It's a little bit similar to the British Commonwealth today, or how the
Mm,
Commonwealth was when it was still an empire. Um,
got you.
that's what he was going for. So Malietoa would have been king of Samoa,
Interesting.
but under Kalakaua in the bigger confederacy.
Right. And I think there were other like island nations in the Pacific in the 19th century that were almost asking to be annexed to the Hawaiian Kingdom. I think Kiribati, if that rings a
Oh.
bell.
Yeah,
Just because I feel like
it's a
they
very
felt like,
unusual place.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's a group of islands that are extremely far from each other and very, very tiny. Um, we happened to land on one of them on the way to Tonga and back,
Oh
called
wow.
Kiritimati Island, and it's a very, very unusual place where you're looking down and you can't tell if it's land or ocean.
Oh wow.
It's an atoll, and they're part of the Republic of it's spelled Kiribati but pronounced Kiribati. It's the Gilbert Islands, actually.
Interesting.
Kiribati means Gilbert, and
Oh,
that's incidentally that's where the missionaries were supposed to go next after Hawaii,
interesting.
and that's where they didn't want to go, and that's why they got into sugar plantations. But yeah,
Mm,
that makes a lot of sense because they are, there's hardly any land. They kind of live on the ocean.
interesting.
Um, yeah,
Do you think that's why the ABCFM or I guess it was the United Church of the Protestants in 1820 that they decided to kind of bunker down in Hawaii because how much money they were making in plantations and maybe they just didn't want to be on the atolls of Kiribati.
yeah, they saw the resources and the plantations. Some of them start out as almost like almost like how we think of like a nonprofit extending out of the church
Interesting.
to fund the church because ABCFM cuts the funding around in the 1840s, between 1840 and 1845. And it's sort of like you need to go to down to the Gilbert Islands.
Mm.
And then when they refuse, it's kind of like you're cut off from support.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that in 1845 they were cut off from their mission.
Yeah. And Hawaii is used in the sort of mission world as the exemplary success story that it's
Mm.
like total complete conversion. And they would say things like, we need to have every other place become like Hawaii.
Yeesh.
And Tonga certainly did. You know,
Yeah.
Tongans are extremely religious and they
Mm.
have
Absolutely.
religious diversity
Right.
within Christianity. There are many, many different kinds of churches, and they even tolerate some non-Christians. So that's almost like a legacy of the Edict of Toleration of Kamehameha III, this idea that you can't dictate belief. You can't force people to
Mm.
believe a certain religion through violence. And it's better
Gotcha.
to, that's a John Locke kind of idea.
Right. I think in the 1864 Constitution, they would have used the article, I believe it said that we believe that all men are kind of free to worship God according to the dictates of their own consciousness. So freedom of religion, and I think when people think monarchy, they think absolute monarchy. They don't think Canada, right? They don't think like all these other free, because Lunalilo was elected, right? Kalakaua went through an election process. So this idea that democracy can't exist within a constitutional monarchy anyways is false.
Yeah, Britain is extremely an extremely free country, right? Under
Right.
a constitutional monarchy. Um,
Yeah. Which is interesting because I believe the king just visited the Senate and everybody
yeah,
applauded, talking about the Magna Carta, Carta
yeah,
democracy, which is kind of interesting.
yeah.
Um,
He did a good job of like subtle nods to
yeah,
his message without outright confrontation, which is something I
right.
appreciate very much.
And I just want to clarify this for our viewers that, Hawaiian sovereignty isn't necessarily a left-wing belief. Like King Tuopo, even though he's conservative, it's really just a belief of, is there a treaty or is there not a treaty, right? Are we a
Yeah.
sovereign country? Could we go into that a little bit more?
I'm glad you brought that up because I said left wing, there would have been an
Right.
asterisk there.
Right. Yeah. No, I know. I figured it would clarify for the viewers.
Yeah. Uh, some people would consider Hawaiian sovereignty conservative in the sense that it is about state sovereignty, which is usually
Mm,
the realm of conservatives.
yeah.
Um, you think about Henry Kissinger.
Hmm.
He was a realist, and that is the conservative worldview within international relations, which says that only the will of states matters.
Mm,
Nothing that happens inside of states, it considers states as unitary actors, meaning whatever the state decides based on its own internal power is what is going to happen. And that's what drives international affairs.
mm,
There are two other ways of viewing it, but that's the conservative one. And so
right.
you could say that what we're talking about is conservative in that sense. But I've written one of my blogs was called Why Hawaiian Sovereignty Transcends Left and Right.
Mm.
And I go into why the labels of left
I
and right
got chicken
don't
skin because
really.
look, I'm half Scottish for people that don't know. So anytime I have a chicken skin moment, I'll just show my hairy arms and my. So sometimes when I feel truth, it's one thing to hear it, it's one thing to feel it. So the fact that I feel a lot of mana right now when you said, this transcends left, right. This is based in grounded principles of constitutionality. And I don't think a lot of people realize how maybe the Hawaiian Kingdom, and I asked this to Lawrence Gunter. So I asked Lawrence Gunter, I was like, why are Polynesians so belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints at very high rates, right? You see Tongan missionaries, Hawaiian missionaries. And he said that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I'm not putting in a plug for any religion, I'm just saying historically what happened was when the Protestant missionaries came, they were supposed to come, convert, and leave, I guess, in 1845 to Kiribati, according to what you're kind of saying, and do it again, right? Replicate their success. Um, but they didn't. They stayed. They got wealthy off of plantations, and ultimately, um, they didn't actually promote Hawaiian leadership, whereas the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints actually did. And I think that's kind of where the shift comes in, because I think Kalakaua even had Walter Murray Gibson in his cabinet, who
Yep.
was supposedly one of the first mission presidents in Lanai. And he gets excommunicated for things like that. But I served a
Right.
mission in Brazil, so that's why I can talk to this. I've always wondered why this wasn't taught in gospel principles when I attended the church. So for all
Mm,
the Tongans listening, because it's the most people don't understand that Tonga is the most uh, LDS country in the world, right?
it is. Yeah.
And Queen Liliuokalani was baptized a member in
Yeah.
1906. And I don't understand why it's not widely known. And one of my plights is, learning all this history, because even the prophet today, he came out with a message that the United States Constitution is an inspired document. He said something like that, and we should protect constitutionality, which was taught a lot in the church that I grew up with. And um, it's interesting because, well, could you speak to the Hawaiian Kingdom Constitution as far as like, where it ranked in the world, how
Mm.
maybe the America's Constitution influenced it?
Yeah. So first of all, there's some little misconception about Mormons in Tonga, and it is the most Mormon country in the world, 35% at the time when I was there.
Yep.
Um, and there are some reasons for that I won't get into, but
Sure.
people tend to think that everyone in Tonga is Mormon, and
Right.
that's not the
That's
case.
not the case. Yeah. No way.
They're a large minority.
Mm,
Uh, Probably the number one denomination in Tonga is Wesleyan Methodists,
interesting.
and that's because that's the king's religion.
Mm,
That's kind of the first missionaries that got to Tonga and
oh,
converted the royal family, and they've stayed with that religion, except for George Tupou the Fifth, who only ruled for about 8 years.
mm.
If anybody's heard about the riots in 2006, that those happened at the beginning of his reign, but he was
Oh, I
an
don't.
Anglican. He was a Episcopal. No,
Oh, like,
not Episcopal, Anglican, because it was
Anglican.
straight from England.
Was it Liliuokalani Anglican? Like, grew up in the Anglican church, I
She
believe.
ended up no, the Kamehameha the Fourth and Emma were the Anglicans.
Oh, that's right. That's
Yeah, and so she, along with Kamehameha the Fourth, brought in the Anglican Church. They sent a bishop instead of just a priest,
right. Mm,
Thomas Staley. And they founded St. Andrew's Priory, which my wife is the principal of today,
oh,
and two of our kids have gone to. Um, but anyway, yeah.
interesting. Well,
A lot of people don't know the subtle nuanced differences between different denominations,
right,
especially among
right.
kind of mainline Protestants like
Mm,
Anglican, Episcopal, and Wesleyan Methodists, and then the Congregationalists, who were the ones who converted all the royal family here. So if you go to Kauai Ha'o Church, you can see where certain monarchs sat, like Lunalilo's. He had a booth that he sat in, and it's still labeled, and nobody can sit there even today. Um,
beautiful.
and we go
That's interesting.
often because of
Oh, there's my chickens again.
yeah.
Being half Scottish, like Ka'iolani really helps. Joking. Um, that is beautiful.
Oh, so as far as the Constitution of Hawaii,
Mm,
we talked about this before, but I had been teaching my students that the U.S. Constitution is the first constitution. If you don't count the Magna Carta, and scholars usually don't, it's just sort of a proto-constitution, like a
Mm,
first constitution-like document. So really, the U.S. Constitution is the first constitution, late 1780s.
mm,
And then by the time Hawaii makes the Constitution in 1840, it occurred to me that only 50 years had passed. And that's not a very long time in a process that you might call constitutionalism,
mm,
because these ideas are not that quick to catch on. You're talking about changing the entire nature of what it means to rule.
mm,
Because when you go from absolute monarchy to constitutional monarchy, what you're saying is that the highest authority in the land is no longer a person, a physical person, but a set of ideas.
wow.
It's above the person. And then the king becomes no longer like the sovereign, right? The word sovereign actually referred to the king, the physical body of the king. With constitutional monarchy, sovereignty starts to reside in the body politic.
Mm,
And the king becomes an office where a person inhabits the office, something like president,
right.
right? Some other, like, I would ask the kids, do you think Obama was born to be president of the United States? And
No, no.
obviously, no, right? He's a
Right.
poor kid from Makiki. At the
Right.
time, blacks can't even vote in the South. The idea of him becoming president in 1961 is inconceivable.
Right.
And yet he was, and so that shows that it's just an office that someone can inhabit,
Mm,
not something you're born with. And then compare it to Kamehameha the third or second, who is literally the son of Kamehameha the first. They're born to be king.
mm,
So it's a very radical change in what it means to what government really means and how it functions. So I thought 50 years is not a very long time. And so I wondered how many countries had adopted constitutions in that time. And it turned out that Hawaii was number 6 on the list.
number 6.
And
Uh-oh.
so I think I'm the first one to say that. And I only said it in my blog, actually. I haven't published it in like a peer-reviewed journal, but I'm thinking about writing an article for the Hawaiian Journal of History on
Mm,
this, because I need to do a little bit more research.
right.
But incidentally, an academic book did quote me on this, and that
Mm,
was Brian Kamauli Kuwata, who wrote a book called The Mana of Translation.
oh,
And it's
wow.
UH Press, and he actually cites my blog, the Umiverse, and that's the first time my blog was ever cited in an academic book. So pretty
Hey,
exciting
let's
for me.
go.
Academics that get excited about footnotes.
Yes, yes. And I support Umi's work. I hear you're going to start a podcast soon as well, right?
Right. So I'm a trustee of the Hawaiian Historical Society. So for those who don't know, it's the entity that publishes the Hawaiian Journal of History, and
Mm,
it's existed since 1892. So the very, very end of the kingdom, and in fact, the first patron of the Hawaiian Historical Society was Liliuokalani herself.
mhm.
And
Um,
at some in the right after that, after the overthrow, it kind of became a missionary endeavor.
mm,
And in fact, it's housed at the Mission Houses Museum. They rent space from the Mission Houses Museum,
mm,
um, right next to Kawaihaʻo Church.
interesting.
But in more recent years, the board has been pretty much taken over by Hawaiians. So Julian Alcoa was the president recently. He's the former principal of Kamehameha. And pro-Hawaiian, very pro-Hawaiian people like Puakea Nogomeyer is still on the board. He's kind of at the end of his term. But I'm the head of communications for the board. So I thought, a podcast would be a way to reach a slightly younger audience.
Wow.
And even older people. Because in our membership, I noticed that we have almost no members born after 1982. And 1982 was 45 years ago or
Yeah,
so.
right.
Um, so it's our membership's getting older and we need to change with the times. So that's the idea behind the podcast. And it would be kind of the usual suspects and kind of, well, Hawaiian history is that there's a lot of interest in it, but it's still not very well known. So I think a podcast would be a way to get content out, such as you're doing, um, in an accessible way that is that's free, and I think people appreciate that. That's a kind of a
Well,
form of
it's
entertainment, but that's
right.
educational as well.
Well, I definitely encourage everybody to, when it comes out, to, subscribe to the podcast and listen in. When it does drop, I'll promise to put a link in wherever this is going on, if it's on Facebook or YouTube or wherever I post it. Because this is a very interesting opportunity. Again, the Hawaiian Historical Society, to Umi's point, was established by Queen Liliuokalani. Um, she was a part of its history, and to the documents that they view history through primary source documentation. So a lot of times we get Hawaiian thought from the internet, or maybe
Yeah,
2001, I believe it was Jean Sumioma who made a flag that didn't exist but said it did, that got popular. But what do the sources say, right? What do the pictures say, and
right.
of what our high was, and no offense to him, nobody knew. We were all denationalized. So all of the stories that we heard about our country were word of mouth for a long time. But when we come to learn that we were the most literate country in the 19th century, I used to say second to Scotland, but could you share with the audience how you corrected me on that? Because I thought that was profound.
So Scotland is not a country and wasn't at the time either. Um, it's technically called an administrative region of the United Kingdom.
Mm,
So it's like England, right? England's not a country today either. It used to be. Um, and so if you're talking about nation states, actual countries, it doesn't matter if Scotland as a formation has a higher literacy rate than Hawaii. Uh,
mm,
Hawaii would be the highest literacy rate as far as countries. And I understand that to be somewhere around 96 to 98, maybe, like
mm,
extremely high. And we see this in the Ku'e petitions, where if you go through all the pages, there's a few X's in there, like X is like your mark, right? If you don't know how to write.
mm.
But then if you look at those X's, and it also has the age, and a lot of those people were 100 years old. So it says X and it says age 100.
Interesting.
That means that they were born before the missionaries arrived.
Mm.
And so then that it would explain that not being literate, but it's very, very, very few in there. Their
Wow.
handwriting's beautiful. It's just
Oh
not,
yeah, the signatures. I created a QR code. I basically took pictures of a bunch of pictures made a Google Photoshop for people that might not have access to the Kuwait petitions. The first 8 pages kind of reference the Silva Minton Index alphabetical pages, and I put those on the bottom of the photo album, and then the meat of the pages in the middle, just so people can have access. Because I worked extensively with the Kuwait petitions under Clara Pana in Maui, and we would go out the community and share it. And
mm,
I can testify that, there were a lot of these moments when Hawaiians saw the names of their kupuna, and how, like you were speaking to, the calligraphy of how they signed, beautiful penmanship. And Puake, who's on your board, um, I had a conversation with him, and I don't think we realized, we had 100 running newspapers in 1893, over one of the first printed colored newspapers of the high Hawaii
yeah,
world. I mean, we can go on and on, but he said that only maybe 2 to 3% of the archives are even translated.
Yeah.
So keep an open mind, audience, as we're learning Hawaiian history, that um, we're we're uncovering it as we go. And this is a very live um, field of study. This is something that may be 133 years old, but let's talk about, I just want to touch on this point about Kuykendall and
Mm.
his version of Hawaiian history. And was he even a historian in your mind, as a Hawaiian historian that's taught for 30, was it 35 years in Kamehameha schools and speaks Olelo Hawaii and works, directly with Loma in the archives? Would you consider Kuykendall an actual historian?
Okay, he was a historian. He had a master's
Hmm.
from University of California, and he was a his expertise and his master's thesis was on the history of California.
Oh.
So after the overthrow, he's hired. So we think about it this way: the guys who overthrew the kingdom hired a guy from abroad to write the history of the kingdom that they just overthrew. And you don't have to know much or even read the book to kind of
Yeah, it'd be like, wait.
understand that that's not going to be a very accurate history. Kuykendall is interesting. Like I think there are some glimmers of conscience in there if you
Hmm.
read carefully, but it doesn't negate the fact that he couldn't speak Hawaiian, obviously. And you see that very clearly in the books. It's 3 volumes. He has a first volume that is Kamehameha the first to the third, and then he has a shorter second volume, which is Kamehameha the fourth to Kalakaua, and then he
Hmm.
has a third volume called the Kalakaua Dynasty about
Hmm.
Kalakaua and Liliu. And he actually died before the third volume was finished. So if you read through it, he was pretty meticulous and he was given the time and the funding to sit at UH and pour through archival documents, but only in English. So he'll document specific letters that, you know, Dole is sending to John L. Stevens and this sort of thing. And then, and Noe Silva points this out in her book, he missed that across the street there's a rally of 7,000 people happening. So this letter is important, but not 7,000 people, which is
Hmm.
half the population of Honolulu at the time,
And
probably.
was that the rally to promulgate a new constitution after the bayonet?
Uh, oh, I can't remember.
Hmm.
I don't want to say um without knowing for sure.
No problem. Do you
Uh,
think the audience might want to know that? Because according to his version of history, it's the Queen Liliuokalani is overthrown by a quote unquote revolution
mm,
because she was trying to enact her own constitution. Yet, wasn't there a petition? Because people couldn't vote after 1887, right? The bayonet. They were disenfranchised unless they owned certain amounts of land, I understand.
$3,000 worth of property.
Hmm.
You know, they got the voter qualifications from the Constitution of the state of Mississippi,
Oh my gosh.
which you think about the timing, it's after the
1887.
Emancipation, it's after the Emancipation Proclamation, but
Wow.
long before the Voting Rights Act. So they need to find legally manipulative ways to disenfranchise African Americans. And the way they do it is these property and income requirements and literacy tests and poll taxes. And
Interesting.
and they say, yeah, we found the way from this Constitution of the state of Mississippi, which is incredibly ironic because their fathers, in the case of Dole, grandfather, uh, were abolitionists. Uh, and all the constitutions say slavery will be forever prohibited in the kingdom. And so you can imagine their missionary fathers rolling in their graves.
Oh God, yes.
And I always try to teach about the missionaries in the way of saying it's fine to be critical of missionaries, but let's be accurate. The missionaries themselves don't overthrow Hawaii.
Hmm.
That that misconception comes along because of a kind of a nickname that's given to these people that we're talking about, which is the mission boys. And mission boys means the sons of the missionaries growing up on the mission, meaning the mission grounds. So,
Oh,
like Mission Houses Museum, the fenced off area, it's called the mission. And the boys, like Hiram Bingham II, people like that are called the mission boys. And then just colloquially, they just started calling them missionaries. Even in the 1880s and 90s, they're still kind of called the missionaries. The Reform Party had a nickname, the Missionary Party, because it all consisted of these sons of missionaries, kind of a scion, they would call it, of the mission families. And so you get this idea that missionaries overthrow Hawaii, but it's not technically true because none of the sons of missionaries became missionaries except for Hiram Bingham II, and
mm.
he's the one who goes to Kiribati, to Gilbert Islands.
Oh, wow.
So he's not here. The rest of them, they're like, I don't want to be poor like dad. The opportunity's there, private property starts, and there's so many ways for them to gain wealth and live like gentlemen. They probably think of it that way, and that's what they do. Uh, I always teach the kids to give a simplified version that there's the three M's um, in colonization. I'm saying that in quotes because you see it in any around the world when there is actual colonization, and that's missionaries, merchants, and military, and in that order. So in Hawaii, it's missionaries in 1820, merchants starting around 1835. That's the beginning of the sugar industry, and then military in 1893. So
Mm.
Hawaii's not an exception as far as the process of
Right.
taking over, even though we are in terms of the mechanism of taking over.
Interesting.
It was not colonization.
Could you explain the difference as a political scientist between, this contemporary colonization versus kind of this new study of,
Yeah.
um, occupation and was it the overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom or was it just the government? What do you think as a political scientist?
Yeah. So it all comes down to how you define the word colonization.
Mm,
Um, colonization has uh, there's a legal way of looking at colonization.
okay.
That is a sovereign state takes over a non-sovereign. So
Okay.
France takes over Tahiti.
Oh, French Polynesia.
Yeah. Hence the
Colonization.
name French
Okay.
Polynesia. And Tahiti is a colony, or French Polynesia is a colony of France.
Right. And what is France doing in Polynesia? Sorry, just said it. Right. Anyway,
Nuclear bombing, nuclear testing mainly. But
yikes.
that's an example of colonization
Right.
legally. But then more and more academics started to talk about colonization as a cultural phenomenon.
Right. Right.
And so they would look at things like language loss, things
Mm,
like loss of political history, understanding political history, which we are talking about right now, um, cultural ways of dress, all these cultural aspects that come along with the legal process of colonization.
right.
And if you look at Hawaii that way, it sure looks like colonization, right? And Hawaii is basically treated like a colony in the territorial period. Um, for example, the fact that Hawaii to this day has the strongest governor of any state, again in quotation marks. That's a legacy of the territorial period because the territories were treated like colonies, and when you have a colony, you want a strong executive in the colony and a weak legislative branch because the executive is appointed
Mm.
right in a territory.
And
So
who was that? The governor or who in the territory? Was that Sanford B. Dole or?
the first one was Sanford Dole. There were about 12 of them altogether. Samuel Wilder King, like Wilder Street is named after. He
Yeah.
was one. Wallace Ryder Farrington,
Mm,
Lucius Pinkham, it was all white guys, some from the mainland, and
Wow,
Samuel Water King is the only part Hawaiian of all of them. Uh,
interesting.
and then Sanford Dole, Hawaiian born. But it was like, who's the most insulting person you could think of to be appointed governor of Hawaii? And that's who they chose. So
I
it
bet.
gives you a sense of how a territory is like a colony. So it really looks like a colony. And so that's why people like Hana Trask we're talking about colonization.
Right.
But then Keanusai came along, you know, about a decade later and starts to show that this is not legally colonization.
Mm.
But even he would admit that it culturally looks at colonization, and even that Hawaii is treated like a colony in the
Right.
territory. Yeah. So I think when we talk about those terms, colonization or say occupation, we just have to define the terms. And
Which is a fair? Are we talking about a legal definition or a
yeah,
cultural definition? Would that be fair?
yeah. And cultural is so murky, right?
Yes, that's why I'm more pro legal, just because
Yeah,
I don't like muddy water. I
yeah,
like my water filtered, right? So
yeah.
I
Gets
like to
into
know.
some of the issues in academia where academia is very left wing,
Mm,
and I just would note I'm not really an exception to that, but I can see it.
right.
Um, and one of the problems with the left is that they've specialized in pointing out the problem and nothing else.
Yeah,
You know,
let's focus on what's wrong.
yeah.
What
So
happened?
yeah, all of the left wing things like if you come to critical race theory or decolonial uh, narratives, post-colonial, it's all critiques. Postmodernism, it's all critiques with no positive agenda. Uh, and so this critique of colonization is this endless critique, and it's very interesting, and it's needed. It's just that that's why the conservative side gets pretty frustrated because it's just an endless critique.
Mm,
People getting tenure for without offering any solutions, really.
right, right. Um, I just have to share this experience I had yesterday. While I'm on the podcast, there was a AANHPI event.
Oh,
I had called multiple times. I do lecture as a guest lecturer after taking Keanu's class in political science and learning, the difference between the overthrow of a government and the overthrow of a country and how that would require a treaty. Um, and I'll provide some resources if you're new to that line of thought. And they had it at the McKinley Art Center in Reno, Nevada, named after President McKinley.
I
And
saw the picture.
yeah, and I have to apologize to the halal that came from California and danced hula because I brought my poo and I didn't feel it was the space to share our culture. And I do come from cultural practitioners. So my grandfather, um, for those that don't know, was a very famous Lomi Lomi practitioner, raised in La'o, only spoke Hawaiian, only learned
Oh,
English till he was about 15. Um, his wife, my grandma, was best friends with Pua Case's mom, Edith Kanakaole. They sold flowers together. Auntie Edith made my mother's wedding bouquet. So as far as the culture of Hawaii, I cannot say that I was raised outside of it, and I deeply respect it. But also hearing these points of views that, you know, and once you just learn about these people and how, I mean, deeply entrenched in white superiority they were, it's really hard to see the hula that Auntie Edith and many of the in my family that perpetuated the Hawaiian language like Helen Lee Hong, that's taught at University of Hilo and brought back, a lot of the concepts of the Hawaiian language to academia. It's very hard to see our culture in that space. Nothing wrong with hula, right? I love hula. In fact, this this, if you see the background, many people might want to know why red curtain, why the royal seal. That came from a story of Kalakaua when he was visiting on his world tour, and he went around the world circumnavigating it and found other non-European countries striving for independence that were practicing their cultural dances. I believe he was invited I believe he stayed in Japan for 20 or 22 days, arrives in Yokohama from San Francisco, and they hold a ceremony at they were showing the Kabuki Theater. And the Kabuki Theater was really interesting because they had lanterns with the Hawaiian flag, Japanese lanterns, and the rising sun. And there were about 1,000 of them lit up. And Mo'i Kalakaua had commissioned a curtain with the royal seal to be made for that theater to express. I guess it would be the very first AA and HPI, right? Here's a connection of Polynesian and Asian cultures and where we're sharing this on a stage we create. So I had a problem with that, and I protested, and I said I brought the Koi petitions because I have to live in what I call joint resolution land. And I actually interviewed Federico Lanzarini, who you introduced a few months ago at Kamehameha Schools. And I asked a very pointed question. I said, after taking Keanu's class, I said, do you feel a senator today could annex a foreign country by a law or a joint resolution, as Newlands did with the Hawaiian Kingdom? And I mentioned Catherine Masto, who is involved in high-level politics here in Reno, Nevada, where I am, where Francis Newlands authored the joint resolution for Hawaii, who was an avowed white supremacist against the 15th Amendment. I could go on and on and on about this guy. And it was under McKinley's administration that 38,000 Hawaiians that signed the Kauai petition were ignored for empire. And even Mark Twain, that was out here, would filibuster Newlands and say, why do we want to become the empire we fought a 7-year bloody battle to rid ourselves of, right? So there were a lot of anti-imperialists at the time, senators in 1897 that, I mean, this great debate that Ron Williams will speak to from 1893 and 1898 of U.S. senators saying, leave Hawaii independent. It's against the Constitution. It's against international principles that a joint resolution was null and void, ipso facto, right? According to Augusta Bacon, who spoke on the Senate floor. So I felt compelled to do something and to kind of say, hey, we're more than a culture, we're a country, and kind of give some of that history and dignity back to the hula that was performed yesterday. So kalamai for my voice, but this is just the kuleana I felt I had that day.
Okay, there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot there. I actually presented at the Association for Asian American Studies. The national conference was here in April.
Right.
My presentation didn't have anything to do really with what we're talking about. It was about the community reception of the television show Chief of War. So that's a kind of a separate issue and interesting on its own. But it's very strange that someone like myself is in the Asian American Studies Association, right? But that's sort of what we've found that we have to do to get the word out is to, there's no Hawaiian history conference. So I've been to American Studies. I've presented at the National American Studies Conference. That's a field, right? There's a Department of American Studies, which it's sort of like a strange, interesting take on U.S. history. It's an area of studies that happens to look at at America. And then I presented at the Native American Indigenous Studies Association. So my thing is to go to the conferences when they come to Hawaii, which invariably they do. And so that's been a convenient way to do that and get some of the word out. But at the it's called AAAS conference. There's a working group on Asian settler colonialism. And it's a good thing in my view, in the sense that they're pointing out and calling out local Asian populations, communities that they're complicit in kind of this process that we're talking about, but they're still using the word colonialism, right? Because the author of the book, which kind of became a semi-classic in local academic works. One of the main authors was kind of the right-hand woman of Haunani Trask. So she's looking at what Haunani's saying and then looking at herself and her community in relation to that. And that's how I think that idea came out. But we have yet to have a face-to-face debate on whether that's the right term. And that could be a future discourse.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to any information that you have on the subject. Just focusing on William McKinley a little bit, just because of yesterday, that's still fresh in my mind. Do you feel that William McKinley and the joint resolution that was authored by Francis Newlands truly annexed the Hawaiian Islands, and why was that treaty never ratified by the United States Senate?
So getting back to the petitions, it might be the fact, it's likely that the petitions brought down the support from the 2/3 that it needed down to just over half. And so to anyone who says, okay, so the petitions were filled out, there's been a number of petitions, who cares? I think the petitions did have an effect in making it so that annexation was illegal on the American side,
Mm.
right? Because it's U.S. senators voting against annexation. And that's the reason why they resort to the joint resolution that Newlands authors, right? So
Could you speak more to how it was authored? Because I hear there was a closed door session. Is that true?
well, there's a closed door session sometime in 1897 or 1898, and that closed door session, the transcript wasn't released until 1969. So,
Whoa, wait.
yeah,
How many years is that? That, gosh,
80,
what is it? 98.
80 years.
I have to, 80 years. I was about to break out my calculator. 80 years, yeah, just about. So
So,
why do you think they took so long to release the transcript?
well, there's obviously something shady going on in the closed door session, and they're waiting till everyone in the session is long dead.
Interesting.
I've actually seen the Star Bulletin front page. It was one of the stories on the front page, kind of a minor story that the headline was transcript released from Hawaii seizure. That's what it actually says.
Wow.
Yeah. And they came out, but nobody really looked at it. Nobody published about it. Keanu Sai brought it to my attention, and I read through it's about 80 pages.
80 pages.
Yeah. And I kind of highlighted what I found to be the most important quotes in my TED Talk, which I gave in 2012 at TEDx Manoa. And that's on YouTube. People can see it. So the quotes are in there.
And I'll post a link to that below.
Bacon, who you mentioned, is one of them.
Mhm.
Representative Pettigrew is another. And they're making arguments on the floor of Congress against annexation. So things like why bring Hawaii into this complication? Why violate the neutrality when we don't need to? Because the whole debate was over seizing Hawaii as a coaling station for the Spanish-American War, the part of the war in the
A
Philippines.
coaling station.
Yeah, yeah,
Interesting.
and the Republic, I guess by then, the Republic had piled coal 9 feet high on Honolulu Harbor, kind of like, come on in,
Oh, like bait.
violate our neutrality.
Oh gosh, they were fishing for annexation.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
Um, and then one of the senators says there's other islands that we have access to that don't require annexing a country. But I think the most interesting quote is from John Tyler Morgan himself, who I pointed out in the TED Talk, had the title of Second Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan for the state of Alabama.
Okay,
So,
sorry. Viewers, if you can see that, this is the
so
man
I,
who led the secret meeting.
yeah,
Probably,
he's
right?
kind
Didn't
of
he
running
lead?
it because
Yes.
in his day job, he's senator for Alabama, but also happened to be quite a skilled lawyer, and he knows what he's doing.
Mm.
And the way I tell it to the students is like he's got a day job as senator, but that his night job consists of putting on a white hood, you know.
Ah, I also am a teacher with children. Could I come up with an analogy that might help too? It feels like a reversed episode of Scooby-Doo, where you put the mask back on to show the bad guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Metaphors are hard because at some
Right,
point you
right,
get
right.
metaphorical breakdown, but
Sure.
to the extent that they work, they can be effective. You just got to watch out for taking it too far.
Right, right.
Yeah. And though I try not to do that,
Hmm.
I
So,
think
so,
we both
so
know
the
Keanu
second,
and he's
yeah,
always
yeah,
using boxing metaphors all the time.
yeah, yeah. I love it. Yeah, hit him in
But
the ring.
if
Yeah.
people don't have much of a context to look at international law because it's such a niche field,
Hmm.
um, and to young people out there who are considering their career, I would say we need some Hawaiian international lawyers.
Hmm.
Um, so even though I have a PhD in political science and I'm more or less qualified to talk about these things, it would be better to have someone with a doctorate in international law, and that's an extremely hard degree to get and fairly rare. But that's what Federico Lanzarini has,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, and Matthew Craven,
Right.
um, and some of the people who've looked at Hawaii and have found along the lines of what we're saying that
Right.
there's a strange form of occupation, to use the phrase of Alfred de Zayas. Uh,
And I think,
you
wasn't he
mentioned
Alfred de
before.
Zayas appointed by the United States to represent them in the UN and
Uh-huh.
graduated from Harvard and international? I mean, he's got a crazy background.
His title is Special Raconteur. I think that's yeah, an appointed, and I don't know that it was a US that did it, but he's anointed by the UN as an expert. There's some people around right now who have that same position with regard to Palestine.
Interesting.
And so what they say on Palestine is supposed to matter more than pundits. He's the same.
Interesting.
Um, it's just that as we talked about earlier, the system of international relations that the whole discussion is happening in is changing as we speak.
Mm.
So uh, we're not sure what's going to be replacing it, but when I teach international relations either at HPU, and I'm going to teach it at Kamehameha
Mm.
this next year. I'm a bit at a loss of what to do because, and I think what I'm going to do is spend about two-thirds of the time teaching the old system that we have had since it goes back to World War II, but in other variations has existed much longer. You could say 1648.
Mm.
the system created at Westphalia in what is now Germany, the system of international this the system in which countries exist, right? The international system. We're not sure what's replacing that. And so I'm going to do about 2/3 of that and then about 1/3 of current events and have the students try to figure out, what is this very interesting and possibly perilous historical era that we're living through. So I had, when we spoke earlier, I had mentioned some proposed theories about what the new system's going to look like. One of them is something called neo-feudalism, because a lot of this boils down to economics, right? So in a neo-feudal system, there's it resembles feudalism, but with a technological aspect. So this has been a idea brought out by the Greek economist who was the economic minister of Greece during the financial crisis. Yanis Varoufakis is his name. He's very much a person of the left, and he says that the tech bros using AI and its surveillance capabilities will create a kind of a new feudalism in which there's not really much upward mobility. And we see this reflected in people like Howard Lutnick, who is the Secretary, maybe of Labor right now. But he was talking about when they were throwing up tariffs. There were about 5,000 different tariff changes that happened in the first year of the Trump administration. And he was saying, if you put tariffs on foreign countries, then you have to have domestic manufacturing to replace that. And then these will be factories. It won't be just you working there, but your kids and your grandkids, which he's kind of trying to make it out as some kind of utopia, but it sounds pretty dystopian to me. And in line with a kind of a new feudal system. So, and then you look at Trump's inauguration, and behind him were all the tech billionaires, right? Google, Elon Musk, Zuckerberg, and Bezos were all like his backers. And so those things do kind of make sense, but I think no one knows for sure. One of my a friend who's someone who understands international relations better than I do says we're a little bit past any theories right now. It's sort of like it's unfolding day by day, and we have to sort of try to make sense of it as it comes out. So that's a little caveat on talking about the Hawaiian Kingdom under the system of states that we've been living in for the last century. And we're not sure what's going to replace that system.
Wow. And these are the difficult conversations that, we have to address. I feel, an indigenous Aboriginal perspective. My elementary school teacher was Pua Case, and she taught that you have to look 7 generations back to move 7 generations forward. So this is why I invited Umi to this podcast, because he has that understanding of what happened before. I would say in the Hawaiian Islands more than most. And, I don't know if I finished kind of the answer that Federico Lenzrini had that does, focus on international law and goddess doctrine in it. I asked, could Senator Masto annex Canada or Mexico by a joint resolution? I actually emailed the video of this interview, and his answer was I'm not familiar with Reno's laws, but
Yeah.
under international law,
Okay.
no.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. It's amazing. You get to people who are supposed to know these things and they're a bit at a loss. I had a student who's kind of come to some prominence recently, um, Jacob Aki. He's a lobbyist for Hawaiian Air right now, and he's on the cover of Pacific Edge magazine. He's kind of making some waves. But when he was an undergraduate, he happened to be invited to a meeting with a Supreme Court justice of the United States Supreme Court. I believe it was Samuel Alito who he asked, um,
Was it him or Scalia? I thought I heard
Scalia?
this. Yeah,
Scalia?
Scalia or
Yeah, it
something.
might have been him. And Jacob asked him, can the U.S. annex territory through a joint resolution, and made it clear that he was talking about Hawaii. And
Right.
the answer was, there was a process. And that pretty much all he had to say. There was a process. And he said, as far as international law, there have been many years of problems there. That was the extent of his response, which to me is a kind of a non-response, either unwillingness to admit what's obvious, or that he was just kind of befuddled by a 19-year-old. Jacob was about 19 at the time, and
Right.
this is and I try to point this out to the kids that we have people running Hawaii who don't know how Hawaii supposedly became part of the United States. The Hawaiian history is not in good shape as it's being taught in the schools for them. I think that's safe to say. And so you have people, and we have some people who were in school before it was even offered.
Mm.
They don't know anything, and that's not how a society is supposed to run, right? We have a
You would think.
serious problem.
Mm. Yes, when a 19-year-old confounds, a U.S. Supreme Court
Yeah,
justice.
right.
And I think that's the interesting thing too, is there was the process. And according, to that newspaper, a process that took 80 years, right, to even publish to the American public,
Oh
um,
yeah.
led
Actually,
by
to
a
get back to
grand
that, I there's one more thing, a pretty important
jury.
point, and that was John Tyler Morgan, the KKK leader of Alabama. He said something interesting, which is the president can't do anything unless we enable him to do it.
Ooh,
So what he's saying was Congress is going to give authority to the president to annex Hawaii, but that's not how annexation works, right? It's a treaty ratified by the Senate. And so if you're enabling the president to do it, it is occupation,
oh, explain more.
because that's the only power that the president has as far as annexation goes, is because of being the commander in chief of the military. Then you have a military occupation, um, which has its own set of rules, but the president alone can't annex. And that statement kind of inadvertently admits that.
And I heard an argument, and maybe you can let me know if this is true, that in the Queen's letter of protest, um, it feels like she knows the puppet government has no authority because she yields to the United States
Yeah,
under protest. I think even there in her protest, she literally states that um, it would violate the international rights, right? Not of Hawaiian subjects, or somewhere along the line of history, she says international rights. Um, but as a head of state, she of a constitutional monarchy, she wouldn't have had the power to. Um, she wasn't an absolute monarch. She didn't have the sovereignty of the land. There's a House of Nobles, there's a legislature that make laws.
right.
If the president of the United States couldn't do it legally, um, and transfer authority or sovereignty, then would it be true that she didn't have the power to relinquish the sovereignty of the Hawaiian Kingdom without her legislature and involvement?
And I think a current understanding, up-to-date understanding now, is that she is relinquishing executive authority.
Mm.
to to
Under protests, right?
be under protest, and it would be to Benjamin Harrison at the time, President Harrison.
Interesting.
Um, oh, but just to go back to Morgan for a moment, he's saying we're going to enable him to do it. That goes against the entire narrative that Congress annexed Hawaii through a joint resolution,
Oh yeah, nobody says McKinley did, right?
right? He just signed the resolution. And then if that annexed Hawaii, then why did they build a statue in front of McKinley High School with a treaty of annexation in its hand, right?
Yeah, for the audience that doesn't know, the only treaty of annexation that exists is in a statue of President McKinley outside of William. And I believe there was a civic club that recently made a
Oh,
plaque in front of it that
right, right.
um, basically says there's no treaty, right? Ratified treaty.
Yeah. And it's worded in a fairly neutral way, and it actually encourages people to study the history themselves.
Mm,
So it's not as confrontational as it could have been, that plaque. But that statue was erected by Sanford Dole and Lauren Thurston when they changed the name of Honolulu High School to McKinley High School.
mm,
And if you think about their background, they're both lawyers. Well, one is a lawyer and one is a Supreme Court judge. And they know the difference between a joint resolution and a treaty.
you're right.
So, and they know that there was no treaty. So why put the treaty in the hand of McKinley? Um, it's a subtle form of a cover up. It's one little step in a cover up. But I think the main cover up was just people don't tend to know these issues, and so they
Right.
kind of ignorance prevails, you could say. And that's
And
kind
it's a reason, and I think for the viewers out there that are Hawaiian, maybe they didn't have the privilege of going to Kamehameha because I didn't. I grew up in Hawaii. And that's why I do these things is really to interview Kamehameha school teachers because you were a lecturer there for 35 years, I think.
of
Is that
24 years at Kamehameha.
wow?
Yeah.
So we're getting firsthand information. Um, and for me, it's learning these things that make me want to learn more. What was this cover up about? Why did Samuel Damon, who was in the provisional government, I believe he became a trustee of Kamehameha Schools.
Yeah, you did.
Uh, and if you'd want to quote him, I could say it, but I think it may make more sense if you did.
So Samuel Damon, and this is the son of the original Samuel Damon. Samuel Chenery Damon was the missionary not for Hawaiians, but for the sailors in Honolulu.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so his parish was in like Chinatown.
Okay.
And so his son is the Samuel Damon who's on the Queen's cabinet.
Mm.
And he's probably the one that is acting somewhat like a spy, where she thinks that
Mm.
he's on her side, but he really isn't. That's what it seems to me. Whereas the
Interesting.
rest of them seem to be trustworthy.
Mm.
And so in one of his other roles, he's a trustee of Kamehameha Schools. And in the period after the overthrow, but before the annexation, he says, if we are to have peace and annexation, the first thing we must do is to obliterate the past.
Mm.
So he says peace because here he is running a school of Native Hawaiians, and then they've just overthrown their government. So there is the possibility of an uprising and all these guys getting killed. So peace,
Oh, wow.
he doesn't want that. He wants peace and he wants annexation. So if we're to have peace and annexation, obliterate the past. And so even at Kamehameha, Hawaiian history isn't taught until the somewhere between 1973 and 76.
Mm.
But even by 1980, I know for a fact that you could circumvent the Hawaiian history requirement by taking other classes related, such as there's one called Sites of Oahu.
Mm.
So in 1980, if you took sites of Oahu, you wouldn't have to take Hawaiian history. So,
Okay.
um,
Mm.
that's only a little bit before I'm getting out of high school. It's
Oh,
not
wow.
really that long ago. And so people who went through that are very much around and kind of running Hawaii now. And so there are ways for them to not learn the history of the place where they live and how we got here. And to me, that's very problematic.
Um, what do you think happens when, on the note of problematic, psychologically, to a nation when generations are taught, a monumental lie that there was a treaty of annexation, that, the Kauai petitions, I don't think were rediscovered by Noinoi Civil until 1996. So psychologically, what do you think happens to people that belong to an occupied country that have been denationalized for over a century? Um, you know, of their psychological understanding of themselves and where they belong in the world.
Yeah, so when I get to the point where I'm teaching about the Hawaiian Renaissance, I always tell the students that I'm old enough just barely to have seen a shift that occurred in the mid 70s.
Mhm.
That to me traces to Hokulea. Hokulea was the thing that made Hawaiians realize that we're not those the stereotypes about Hawaiians are not accurate, where Hawaiians are you know Hawaiians are people who don't go to college and all the stereotypes,
Mm,
lazy and all of those things. But we were actually the great navigators of the ancient world, not the Vikings. So we're better than the
mm,
Vikings. Like that's a big statement, and especially for Hawaiian males who didn't have much to connect with in the culture.
mm.
Um, it's a complete reversal, so that before about 76. So I was born in 71.
Uh-huh.
So I was young, but I was, my uncle is Peter Apo, and he was living at Makua in 77,
Mm,
you know, in a shack, in a shed and trying to fight the military. So he's very much, he's in the first group of OHA trustees.
right.
Um, he's very, very active in the Hawaiian community and has been his whole life. So people like him, so I'm very aware of what's happening in the Hawaiian community, even though I'm very young.
Mm,
um, I was able to see the shift where before that time you have Hawaiians pretending not to be Hawaiian. And then fast forward to more recent times and you have the complete opposite, non-Hawaiians pretending that they are Hawaiian.
yeah.
That would not happen. In the early 70s, there were no such people like that. That didn't exist. Um,
Oh,
and now it's so prevalent now that there's a word for it in academic settings called faux Hawaiians. Um, because Hawaiians have a cultural identity now, and some other groups don't, and they want to kind of be part of that. And it's unfortunate, and this caused quite a bit of dissension in the Hawaiian community about do these people get accepted or not, or whatever. But this is a new thing, right? And it
yeah.
couldn't be more of a reversal. And I'm just barely old enough to kind of have experienced it firsthand.
Yeah.
Um, and so young people now can't even imagine what it was like,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
They grew up completely within the Renaissance uh, era, because Renaissance is pretty still much going as strong as
Mm.
ever. So,
After my allotted 3 minutes yesterday with the AANHPI, after blowing my poo to speak, there was a doctor that kind of went up and thanked me for addressing um, the harm that McKinley caused to the national identity of the Hawaiian people, and bringing the Kauai petitions as evidence of the crime. Um, and she said, you know, Alex belongs to a sovereignty movement. And I just for my podcast viewers, I don't. I don't feel I belong to a movement. Um, the only moving I'm trying to do is between these two really big ears that Akua gave me in my brain and challenging, you know, obviously, yes, there were movements to get us to this point, which I respect. But I think right now, the question of Hawaiian sovereignty, I don't consider Federico Lenzerini someone in the sovereignty movement or Augusta Bacon or Mark Twain. It just seems like you said, that Hawaiian sovereignty really transcends all political spectrums, left or right, that this is just historical evidence, right? So I think many in the Lahui will say things like, show us the treaty, right? And that's kind of where I'm at a very calm, if you knew me, I'm a very calm, um, I don't get very loud. Um, so yesterday was rare for me, even me as a person, but I felt I needed to bring my poo and say this is not the place to represent the Hawaiians at all because McKinley worked um, you know was the one that agreed with Morgan in doing what he did and I think people like you are very extremely invaluable to the Hawaiian community in looking at you know what happens um, psychologically and okay so and another thing I want to make sure that people understand as much as I talk about Hawaiian sovereignty I after taking Keanu Sai's class I learned that the Hawaiian Kingdom had the similar citizenship laws as the United States. So if you're born to an American, you're an American. You're born on American soil, you become American. If you which is I think being challenged right now, but naturalization, right? Legally residing in America and taking a naturalization exam actually helped because I speak 5 languages. Mandarin was one of mine, and I would help translate from Mandarin the national anthem, right? The United States national anthem to help Chinese immigrants actually become part of the United States. But when we learn that there's a missing treaty of annexation, I don't know if that's what I should have been doing. And I reflect on that. But I've gradually gotten to the point of understanding where Federico Lenzerini, when you introduced him, I believe he kind of ends with some questions from you. And one of his answers to the questions was, what do you think we should do now? Right? And he said, well, maybe I'll give you the floor to kind of highlight what was said about belief in the Hawaiian Kingdom and the Hawaiian subject.
Well, that was pretty much it.
Hmm.
It was like outside confirmation that we were on the right track, I would say. Yeah, he said, believe in the Hawaiian, and I don't know what we're either kingdom or the country. This is not a fantasy that a few people have made up. It's like
Yeah.
the history bears out that we seem to be right. And on that note, I think the process of getting outside confirmation was very valuable because one of the things that I've always had to have tried to have as my approach, and I appreciate about Keanu Sai's approach, was always questioning, could this be wrong? We be wrong? And then verification. Um, and I still teach my students about annexation as it's debatable, you know, but I challenge them to go out there and get the knowledge that would be required to actually make a judgment and don't come to a snap judgment. And that
Hmm.
might be a lot of education.
Right.
But if they're able to come back and tell me that I was wrong, if 15 years from now, and they can prove it, I will accept it. That's my approach. So I think Federico was part of that. This here's a guy from Italy who understands the system and then only learned the details later, and he's saying, believe in this. This is not someone who has something to gain from it, right?
Right.
So that kind of external validation is really critical, and so that's why it's kind of unfortunate that the step that was supposed to be happening after that the event that you're talking about, which
Mm.
was explaining kind of a Lance Larsen case part two,
Right.
never did occur because something happened in the world court where the U.S. got the court not to accept Hawaii again, even though they had previously around 2000. And so what exactly happened, I'm not sure, but it coincided with Trump taking office. So
Mm.
it seems to be because they were talking about 2017.
Coincidental.
Yeah.
Well, I don't find it because I honestly um my views and to the viewers out there, I'm actually more interested in learning about Hawaiian Kingdom heads of state in this stage of my life than even current U.S. politics and presidents, just because, learning like for instance, your favorite quote from Kamehameha the third that we talked about earlier, I think fascinates me more than current policy. But also, I have to keep up to date. But I remember during his inauguration speech, he mentioned changing the name of Mount McKinley from, I think it was Mount Denali, the
Yeah.
indigenous term for the mountain. So I knew he was coming for us eventually because
Yeah. And seeing that McKinley is his favorite president,
yeah, yeah,
um,
like, oh, I know how this is gonna go.
that's not good
Um, no.
for us here.
What would surprise Americans most, on all parties, right, if they learned this full history of Hawaii?
So I am on a committee. There's an institution called the Gilder Lehrman Institute.
Hmm.
People can look the Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History. People can look that up, and even though it's a, it's not part of the government, just by virtue of how good they are at what they do, they've become like the de facto main institution for guiding Hawaii American history or U.S. history.
Interesting.
And so they have a advisory board right now of very, very top-notch people who want to improve the teaching of Indigenous history within the U.S. history class or high schools. Um, and so I'm on that, and I'm
Right.
the only Hawaiian on it. And so, I kind of have one job, and
Yeah.
that is to make sure that the one paragraph about Hawaii in the U.S. history textbook, it pretty much is one paragraph in every U.S. history textbook,
Mm.
that it's accurate in mentioning the lack of a treaty. Now, I have seen advanced placement U.S. history textbook that mention the joint resolution.
Mm.
So, in fact, in my TED talk, I pointed out that that is superior to the old Hawaiian history book that has been used in DOE for decades.
Oh yeah.
The AP US book is better on Hawaiian history than the Hawaiian history text,
Oh
which just
God.
shows you what a crazy place we live in. But it still doesn't do the critique of is this legal? So that's a problem.
Right.
And then the issue there is that we've had a little bit of tension kind of ongoing for a while now between Hawaiians who are in this field the way that we're talking and
Mm.
Native Americans who have a view of themselves as sovereign.
Mm.
And so in the first meeting of this advisory board, I tried to point out that we're talking about a country, in the case of Hawaii, with treaties with over 20 countries. And no Native American nation has anything approaching that. Usually they have just a few treaties with the United States, and that's it. And
Right.
so it's a different status. And so what I'm saying is that I'm trying to get this nation state analysis through without offending the native nations who don't have that status,
Hmm.
but sort of see themselves as sort of either they have it or they should have it.
Right.
Because most of the people on this committee are Native American.
And I just want to touch on this because living in Reno, Nevada, I have the privilege of working alongside the indigenous Numu and Deborah Harry, who um, recently at UNR was inducted, I believe, through the American Academy of Arts and Sciences on her impact of Indigenous scholarship. She's awarded the national label. Um, I want to say last month, which was really exciting for her. Um, and Deborah Harry is told me not to use the word Paiute because that was a colonial term for her tribe here in Reno, which had to deal with the joint resolutions of Francis Newlands taking their water away from
Oh,
indigenous communities. But it's really interesting because, he's dealing with domestic law within the quote unquote state of Nevada that has a treaty called Guadalupe Hidalgo, and he's moving water around away from them. And the reason why I talked to her originally was because I was considering doing my doctorate and continuing to, expose the conversation of the missing treaty of annexation at the University of Reno. Um, and I didn't enroll because I don't identify as a native Hawaiian. I believe that the University of Hawaii has the option to kind of say you're a Hawaiian national. So instead of AANHPI, I would hope it would be AA and then flip the NH to HN, Hawaiian National, right? Like I belong to the country.
yeah.
Um, and I'm learning about, how legally that's true by interviewing, experts in just history and law and international internet, framework. And when I came to her office and I said, because it was funny too, because when I came there, there was a gender and race identification as well. Right next to her office, there's someone that, people want to identify as one thing or another. But I just said, I don't identify as the legal term, a Native Hawaiian. Could we fight for a place for me in the college? And I've advocated extensively. So she's actually invited me to, I think last year before she got the award, I probably lectured, I want to say at least 4 times last year. And you think how many lectures you have as a professor for your class on this idea. Um, and some of the head of the AA and HPI actually attended some of the lectures, which were literally just PowerPoints from Dr. Keanu Sai about, quotes from Samuel Damon, McKinley, and the missing treaty of annexation. Um, and I was invited back again and again and again. But when I went to her office, she was actually studying treaty law. And she says it's her belief that Deborah Harry, who got her doctorate in biocolonialism in Aotearoa, and that's actually why I'm wearing this today. Um, I found out I had some DNA and Maori DNA, but she got her doctorate in biocolonialism, right?
Yeah.
How that helped the sicknesses and diseases that were spread. But just so the indigenous community know, I am part American Native myself, and the reason why these stories and accuracies I feel matter, and I think every indigenous community in the United States and abroad would agree that, as David Malo said, our most prominent historian, that do not let others tell your history.
Yeah.
And I think having that respect that, Hawaii was different and how it was different, I think led to Federico Lenzrini coming to the understanding that Hawaii might be an occupied country because I believe Dr. Kianasai was in Italy and he said something like that to someone that was studying kind of this idea of indigeneity of Hawaii and colonialism. I forget where her name was, but then he challenged her to find the treaty between the United States and Italy. And she went
Mm.
to what she thought was the original library, but I believe under
Yeah.
Mussolini it was a different place. So she finds it, and then they have the active treaties on the left,
Yeah.
or something like that on the right. If you
Yeah.
want to tell that story, that could be interesting.
Okay, well, there's a personal connection here. I went
Oh, okay.
to Europe in 2023 with my family, and my original plan, because we were
Right.
going, the way that our trip routed through was we were going to be in Milan, which we were,
Mhm.
and then go to Paris. And the train, we were going to take the train. The train from Milan to Paris goes through Turin or
Mm.
Torino, which is where Robert Wilcox went to school and
Wow.
it used to be the capital of Italy.
Turin.
Turin, yeah.
Interesting.
So the plan was to stop there on the train and try to go to the treaty library and see with my own eyes what I had heard, which was that the treaty, the Hawaiian Italy treaty, got moved from the canceled treaty section on one side to the active treaty section on the other side because of a scholar, Italian scholar who had come to Hawaii and learned this history that we're talking about. That was the plan, but I we found out that it actually cost less to fly than to
Oh,
take a train, and it was so much faster. It would have been like it's like 8 hours on the train
yeah.
instead of 1 hour on the plane and things like that. So, and it was a vacation trip, so I didn't want to really have it turn into a work trip. So
Yeah.
that's the one downside about that is that I didn't get to see with my own eyes, and so I still have to take people's word for it that
Mm.
that treaty is in the active treaty section. Um, Next time I go, I will definitely try to
Verify.
do
Yeah.
that. So Italy is a place I want to go back to. Um, yeah, so the Italian treaty and the Swiss treaty apparently are considered to be still in effect.
Interesting.
Yeah, according to my information. So then, that's one of those things where you have to connect the dots yourself. That's always been my approach is to bring up some facts and then if this, then what? And let the audience or the students fill in that gap. But
I think there were some interesting points with the Swiss treaty too, where it's like you didn't have to. There's something with a visa or passport requirement that I don't know if it was land ownership or something, but Nicholas Schweizer, I believe, would have been the expert in Swiss treaty, Hawaiian Kingdom treaties. But could you speak a little bit more about that? You mentioned the Swiss treaty a little bit there.
oh, I don't know much about it.
Okay.
I know Niklaus and he's a big supporter of this. He's in some of the documentaries
Right.
confirming what we're talking about. And so he is the Swiss consul to, or he was the Swiss consul to Hawaii. So he's
Wow.
within the diplomatic framework. And he's written a book, that a lot of people I think haven't seen. Do you know about his
Mm.
book on Hawaiian sovereignty? So it's called Turning Tide, The Ebb and Flow of Hawaiian Nationality.
Wow.
I always found that's one of the least known and best books about this topic, especially for the time that it came out, which is about 1999.
Wow.
And I think the reason is it's by a European publisher, so it's by Peter Lang Press. So
Mm.
if people want to look that up, Turning Tide, Ebb and Flow of Hawaiian Nationality, Peter Lang Press, Niklaus Schweizer, the author. That's a
The
good one.
Swiss ambassador to interesting Switzerland
Swiss consul.
consul.
So, yeah, so ambassadors are always in the capital of the country, right?
Oh,
Someone in a
got it.
non-capital city is a consul,
Consul.
and
Okay.
they deal with business issues of the nationals of their country.
Interesting.
So if you look in Nu'uanu, there's a bunch of consulates, the Philippine consulate, the Japanese consulates on Nu'uanu Street, uh, South Korea. There's a number of them in one neighborhood, but they're all consuls, whereas in the kingdom, they would have been embassies.
Mm.
Yeah, but they're consulates now. In fact, there was a time when the Japanese consul wanted to come to my class
Wow.
to see this information taught in an actual classroom and not just in a theoretical academic discussion, that it was kind of actively used in the community.
And I don't think our audience, well, maybe they don't know, but I believe the Hawaiian Kingdom and Japan had treaties as early as 1871.
Yeah, that was an interesting one because Japan is not a recognized country yet.
Oh,
So that is called an unequal treaty. And if you know about the history of the Paulet Affair period, where Britain says um, you should only judge British citizens by British law,
hmm.
that sounds racist, but actually that's what Hawaii did to Japan. In that treaty, it says Japanese, Hawaiian citizens in Japan should be tried for any crimes at the Hawaiian consulate under Hawaiian law, the Hawaiian consulate in Tokyo.
Wow. So in the 19th century, as a Hawaiian subject of Japan, if you committed a crime, you would be punished according to Hawaiian Kingdom law in your consulate, not Japanese law of the.
Yeah, because Japan is not sovereign yet. And in fact, during the trip to Japan, which you mentioned by Kalakaua, Emperor of Japan asks him to recognize Japan. So Hawaii's higher than Japan in it, right?
Right.
And that's because the emperor normally wouldn't meet with people. He's considered to be like a deified being.
Right. Yeah.
And so that was a big deal. But he says to Kalakaua, "Will you recognize us?"
Right.
Kalakaua says, "I'll think about it."
Well, yeah, which he considered, and a lot of people don't know this about me, but my first degree was East Asian studies. So I
Oh,
got a Freeman scholarship at Kapiolani to study Mandarin, and I lived at Tokai University off of I think it was McCully. There's
yeah, yeah. The building.
that building, and to me, it's kind of like mini Japan. When you're in there, all the students speak Japanese. Um, And it's just interesting this Hawaiian and Japanese connection that even in the academia is very strong and prevalent with Tokai. Um, and I don't think I think it would have been a different story had I known the treaties that the Hawaiian Kingdom had and the diplomatic relations. I think
And that Hawaii recognizes Japan. Apparently, according to recent research, Hawaii does recognize Japan in January 1893, and
oh
it's
wow,
right around the time of the overthrow. So
right.
that suggests that the overthrow is not really real either, right?
Ooh, explain.
Because I think it happens like on January 19th or something like that.
Uh,
And and I mentioned this to Keanu. I said, so that means Liliu's still the queen. And he said, yeah, she's still the queen. And in fact, she says in her book, Grover Cleveland still refers to her as the queen in November or December 1893. 11 months after the overthrow, he's still calling her Queen Liliuokalani because the overthrow is it's really like a non-event. It's all about what is the reaction of the US
mm,
gonna be.
the
And so,
9 foot stack of coal, the bait to believe
yeah.
it, the puppets. Interesting.
So that goes very much against the commonly held idea that Hawaii becomes part of the United States in 1893. Like no one thought that at the time.
Not even the president.
Not even Lauren Thurston, because why try to get annexation if you're already part of the United States, right? That's just
Yeah, that's true, right? Because they always say that the overthrow happened in 1893 and that's it. The kingdom's gone.
yeah. That's your just your common person on the street. They know about the overthrow, but and I really have to drill it into my students that there's a 5-year gap between overthrow and alleged annexation. And during that time, Hawaii is still sovereign. It's just that it's not controlled by the monarchy anymore. It's a different government, which you alluded to earlier. Government was overthrown, but not sovereignty.
And this kind of happened before, right? In 1842 with Kamehameha III.
Right. Yeah, Liliuokalani's modeling her response, her letter after Kawakiauli's letter. If you just take out British and put in US, it's the exact same structure.
Wow.
I yield to the superior forces of the US instead of Britain under protest. Same structure. And so it's a very Hawaiian thing to do in the sense of looking at history in a practical way. So what did they do? Has this happened before? What did they do? Did it work?
Hmm,
So has this happened before? Yes, under Kawakiaoli. What did he do? Yield to the British military under protest. Did it work? Yes. Oh,
interesting.
yeah.
And for people that don't know this, and a big shout out to Chief of War, I just have to thank them. They did something phenomenal that I think kind of flew under the radar
Mm.
for a lot of Hawaiians. And that was normally Apple series TV shows come out on a Friday. And it just so happened when they released
Yeah.
Chief of War, Friday was Jason Momoa's birthday, August 1st. So Thursday would have been July 31st. Could you tell the significance of July 31st and why Chief of War elected to release in Hawaii at 3 p.m. Um, this 10-year project on the Hawaiian Kingdom on instead of Jason Momoa's birthday, but find a way to get it to Hawaii on that day.
I think you had something to do with that.
I think indirectly they knew. I'm going to say that they got some of their information, most of it, from visiting Mauna Kea. And I believe they had Pu'uhulu, I think it was called, where you had, Kaui Dudawa. It was incredible. I mean, she went to The Hague
Yeah,
and,
she's really important. And
oh
I,
gosh,
I'll
yes.
sort of answer your question with a little
Yeah.
embellishment that
Yeah, yeah,
relates
go ahead, go
to
ahead.
her. About a month ago, they released the very first Hawaiian opera,
Wow.
which is the story of Timoteo Ha'ALILIO
Thank
traveling
God. Oh, sorry.
to,
I really want his story told. So thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank
And Kau'i, it was all based on Kau'i Sai's research. They
you. Good.
thanked her at the opera. Um, so we're talking about Quinn Kelsey, he's been called the top Verdi baritone of his generation. This is a Hawaiian guy,
Really?
and he's a graduate of University High School. He's been all he does is sing in operas. He's a professional opera singer and one of the top in the world. And he played HAʻALILIO in this opera.
No way.
And his sister played
Whew. Sorry.
Kekauluohi.
Viewers, if you can see,
It was big time. I mean,
oof.
so the really crazy part that I think nobody noticed, but I wrote a review on my blog of it, and it actually got even people who were in the opera had they reposted it.
Wow.
Um, that at the very end of the opera, the singer who plays Kawikiaoli says "Ua mau ke ea o ka aina kapono." It was a long run. You know how opera it is. They
Oh,
take
yeah.
one idea and they stretch it out,
Stretch
and
it out.
so
Yeah.
by the end, he finally says the line, and he like holds his arm up like this, and it's the same scene. He's wearing the exact same uniform as Kawikiaoli, the statue across the street from Blaisdell Concert Hall, but it's literally facing the Blaisdell. And I don't know how many people really caught on to that, but I was just absolutely blown away. The entire opera sitting there just thinking we have an opera in Hawaiian, which I didn't know it was happening until just a couple of months before it came out, but it's been
Mm,
behind the scenes. It was being worked on, and there was a number of people who were important. Kau'i being, it probably wouldn't have happened without her. Uh, the
wow.
script was written by Nalani Newble, who is probably our top. Alani Apio and Nalani Newble are our top playwrights. But she didn't really even know about HAʻALILIO that much. So Kaui's research was really, really crucial for that. And then the July 31st is the day that he says that line. So it's the comes to be the Hawaiian holiday, Lāhui, which is celebrated every year at Thomas Square, right across the street from the Blaisdell Concert Hall. And I will be there. It's celebrated now on the closest Sunday to July 31st.
Ah, okay.
Whatever that will be. I'll be there because I'm going to be tabling for the Hawaiian Historical Society
Wow.
at that event. And it's grown and grown. You know, I was at the second or third one that they ever had, and it was Kekuni Blaisdell was the one who
Mm,
started it. I was like 16 years old,
yeah.
and my mother was asked to speak. She's an old friend of Kekuni,
Yeah.
and I was standing there thinking, oh, crazy Hawaiians
Yeah.
wanting to be sovereign, but you know, within a few years, it got to the point where people thought some kind of sovereignty was right around the corner. So we were proven wrong in a pretty short order. But
Yeah. It was
I
very,
thought I'd answer your question with a bit of an embellish with the opera.
yes, yes.
I'm a regular opera goer, so
Right.
I can attest that it was pretty much on par with major operas like Carmen and Aida and stuff like that. I mean, as far as the performance was very high quality, and it's a world-class people in it.
Oh,
And there were a
beautiful.
few Hawaiians. There's another Hawaiian woman who is a professional opera singer
Beautiful.
who played HAʻALILIO's wife.
Wow.
And then Queen Kelsey's sister was also in it. So three Hawaiians. You could never probably have a cast of all Hawaiians because there's so much training you have to. It's not a typical occupation to get into, but they
Mm,
did pretty well with three out of the top seven or nine main
right.
characters. Yeah.
And I think, I guess just to kind of talk about my journey learning all of this, something that's really kind of stopped me to realize that maybe the overthrow was, like you said, as it's framed today is not accurate. And one of it was, hey, here's electricity before the White House, telephones. But it's hard to say even colonization when you realize the Hawaiian Kingdom had an opera house, right? That we had operas going
Yeah.
on in our
Yeah.
country.
Oh, in fact, when I came out of the opera, the first person I ran into, outside in the crowd was Tiffany Lani Ing.
Oh, sorry. If you haven't read Reclaiming Kalakaua, I feel
Yeah.
like between that and Osorio's book and now this new book, old new book from Schweizer, I think we can get your books and articles. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, so the author of Reclaiming Kalakaua, which has really been a game changer in shifting the narrative from what I was talking about earlier with Kuykendall, portraying Kalakaua as a kind of this buffoonish diplomatic mission in
Mm,
Samoa. But she along with Kealani Cook, another historian, very, very good historian, he teaches at UH West Oahu. He has a book called Return to Kahiki. I just want to give these people credit.
sure.
The two of them are kind of reframing Kalakaua from this just extremely flawed
Mm,
depiction that we get, which goes back to some extent Kuykendall, but also some people who actually knew Kalakaua, like W.D. Alexander. W.D. Alexander was a Punahou teacher who was pretty scholarly, and he wrote some histories before the overthrow. And he doesn't criticize the monarchy in any of those. And then after the overthrow, all of a sudden he pours out his like vitriol against Kalakaua. He's not very he more approving of Kamehameha V, but
mm,
Kalakaua he's got really no time for. And it kind of this our inherited sense of Kalakaua comes from those guys. And so it's really important that Tiffany and Kealani are reframing Kalakaua. So when I ran into Tiffany Lani Ing, like 1 minute after pouring out into the the grounds, of Blaisdell, we both said this is something Kalakaua would have done. Like that's the thought that we both had
No.
of his the kind of a grandeur that he would have liked. It's kind of his
Mm,
way of thinking. And there's also the opera house. So
mm. And honestly, that's the kauna behind this logo behind me. It was Tiffany Lonnie Ng where I read that
oh
story
yeah.
that he had commissioned to create this curtain for the theater. Um, my second cousin, so um, my grandfather's brother, Arthur Pe'a. John Pe'a was my grandfather. Arthur Pe'a is the father of Kalani Pe'a. So my second cousin, who is classically trained in opera, um, and Grand Junction University. It's performed in Carnegie Hall and all these big places. It's touring London. I woke up on Wednesday to a bunch of messages because when he was in London, they display the ahaʻula that were exchanged by Kamehameha II and Kamamalu. And unfortunately, that's where they contract. I want to say it was measles or tuberculosis or one of those, and pass away and come back. But there's a picture and it says Manawia was on that. My second on their royal envoy, which is significant to the Pe'a Ohana because John Pe'a, my great grandfather, married Keawe Manawia. Um, so we're kind of learning about our ohana and these very important travels because I think we think Kalakaua first to circumnavigate the globe. But even Kamehameha II, was going pretty far into Europe,
Yeah.
Brazil, and other places.
Brazil, yeah. Rio. Um, well, I think it's important for all Hawaiians to do that kind of research in their own family because if nothing else, to be able to find the ancestral names in the Ku'e petitions. Like for
Absolutely.
some of us, we think that's not a problem. Like we know who these people are. Like for me to trace back to my great great grandfather who's on page 625,
Mm,
it's not a problem for me. My mother was raised by his daughter. He's
mm.
born in 1870. So for me, these are not ancient things. This is relatively recent, and I can
Yeah, you
go
might have
far
known
back.
them or met them at a young age.
I can go so far back before that. But for the students who I run into, they can't sometimes can't go past their grandparents.
Mm,
Many of them can't go past their great grandparents. So if you're talking about Ku'e petitions, that's like great, 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 and sometimes even another generation. So that's pretty far. And I say all you have to do is know where your ancestors were living in 1898, but that's really a long time ago for them. So it's those younger people who I'm kind of imploring to do the kind of research that you say that you're doing to your family, so
well,
you
well,
can see that they signed this petition, which is very clearly written in Hawaiian and English, so they knew what they were saying. And
mhm,
it says, "We earnestly protest against the said annexation of the Hawaiian Islands to the said United States in any shape or form, in any shape or form." And so then I asked the students, as Hawaiians, do we listen to our kupuna or do we just ignore them because they're old?
mm.
And they know. You
Yeah, they know.
the
Better know
one thing
better.
they do know, you listen, you don't just ignore them because they're old.
All of a sudden, you see this hand beyond the veil, pull your pepe out.
Oh, man. My elementary school in Tonga, that was the actual punishment still
Oh,
in effect. Yeah.
yes, I've been to many Tongan wards as a Mormon that I've seen many pepeos pulled. It's rich.
Slapping the head too.
Yes, yeah, unfortunately. But um, yeah, so it's just what an incredible. I mean, I want to rewatch this podcast just to get everything. I mean, I don't know how many times I've shown my Scottish arms. But what a testament. And I just applaud all researchers, Tiffany Lanying, you, others that are really Puakea, all the students, all the volunteers, you know, in the archives that organized the Kuwait petitions for us to research. It's just fascinating, and I think Donovan Preza is someone who I want to have soon on this podcast. Really talk about because they don't just sign their names, right? It's their name, their age, and also where they signed. So this was kind of interesting for me because Ron Williams had given I was one of six of the founding members of HAʻALILIO when we're kind of revitalizing what it meant to try to walk in the footsteps of the Hawaiian Patriotic League. I was the
Mm.
finance guy because I have an MBA in finance. And not that we got very far. I don't think we raised any a penny, but we tried. And parliamentary procedure and what, you know, how they had organized them. I think even Dr. Keanu Sai tried to take in a middle school exam in the 19th century and couldn't pass. I mean, I'm just going to say this blatantly. I think we failed our kupuna in attempting to walk in their footsteps. I don't think we could even crawl in how advanced that they were and how they were able to. Anyways, Ron Williams had found a pet that was a treasure, which was interesting because I became the treasurer. So
Mm.
it's and then there was a presidenia or president of that was a pet as well. But they all signed in Puna. Now I'm raised Mormon, so I never learned that I had Catholic family, right, on the other side of the island. So Kilkahas were predominantly they are, and Maui, I think one of my ancestors baptized in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in 1860. So very, very early on in the Mormon mission, Manawia. So that's how most of my family are you know, members of the church. And I didn't know that, right? I didn't know that it was the Maui lineage, the Manawia that went with was in the royal entourage, right? With Kamamalu and Kamehameha II. And I also didn't know that we had family in Puna. So, anyways, I'm researching and I'm like, I type Pe'a in Facebook and I see this name Leighton Pe'a. And and you know, it seems like he lives in Puna. So I reach out to him and come to find out his father was Kini Levi Pe'a, who was one of the Kamehameha students that's on I think it was 135 students were chosen by the United States military to kind of colonize these remote islands in the Pacific.
Oh yeah.
He was one of those students. And I don't know if you can kind of speak to the history of that. And I think it was like a year if you have a citizen live there, it's considered your part of your country. And if you want to touch on kind of
Well,
that
the I
history.
know Kamehameha students were sent there, the Line Islands, during World War II. Talking
Mhm.
about? Yeah,
Yeah.
so they're looking for Japanese submarines. Um, One of them, I believe, was Abraham Pi'anaya,
Oh, wow.
who was the founder of Hawaiian Studies at UH Manoa.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah. When I first got to Kamehameha, the archivist of the school had kind of discovered this program, and
Mm.
they ended up making a documentary. So there's a documentary called Under a Jarvis Moon,
Mm.
and that's about that. But it kind of speaks to the hardiness and survival skills of pretty young Hawaiians who were right at the end of high school age. Um, but also the military aspect of Kamehameha. So right after Damon says that line, ROT, ROTC starts pretty soon after that. And so Kamehameha becomes this military kind of institute.
Interesting.
And fast forward to Vietnam, and you had something like half of the boys of the class of 1963 die in Vietnam, and a
Oh my
third of the
God.
class of 66.
Half?
I'd heard that.
Jeez,
So
that's wow.
these natives are joining the military in this patriotic way, and then they're sent right to the front lines, it seems,
Ugh.
because 55,000 Americans die in Vietnam. And so for one high school to lose that much seems very disproportionate, you
Yeah,
know.
half of your student cohort for that year. That's incredible. And I think Federico Lanzarini would attest. I believe conscription into a military as an occupier would constitute as a war crime.
Yeah. So we can get into the law of occupation. That's a whole
Probably
so
a whole other podcast.
I taught a class on
Uh,
that, which is very unusual. You know, classes like that hardly exist because usually it's like 1 or 2 weeks within a regular international law class.
Interesting.
But in this class, which I inherited from Kuhio Vogler, was kind of based on his dissertation. Um, we look at all the examples of occupation and we then look at Hawaii to see, is this really an occupation? So again, this approach of could this be wrong? So we're looking at
Sure.
France during World
Trying
War
to poke
II,
holes.
the Vichy
Mm,
regime, the yeah, um, a bunch of World War II occupations, looking at Iraq from 2003, um, Palestine, which is slightly different, but uh, um,
Do you guys study the Baltic states too in Soviet
yeah,
Union?
yeah, as a form of deoccupation, yes.
Mm,
So I show that the film called The Singing Revolution,
mm,
which is definitely worth watching. It's a very inspiring story of kind of against all odds, breaking away from the Soviet Union, a very violent occupier, and they talk about suppression of history. It was really bad there in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania.
I believe I want to say it was Niklaus that had mentioned on one of his podcasts or interviews that he was there when they sang the national anthem.
Oh yeah.
And oh, there you go again
Yeah.
for the audience. I
I
couldn't
like the
imagine.
idea of a singing revolution because it reminds me of song contest.
Kamehameha, right?
Yeah,
Could you imagine Hawaii Ponui, the verses that Kalakaua himself wrote, um, being sung after the occupation and just holding that hope or memory or belief that Federico Lanzarini told us to, something I dream about.
well, I've been very appreciative of Raiatea Helm for beginning to popularize the previous national anthem, um, which Liliuokalani wrote
mm,
for Kamehameha V.
I see.
And I think it's Mele Lahui. And
Interesting.
she has a very beautiful rendition of it, which everybody can listen to. Jeff Peterson plays guitar on it, but it's on YouTube. It's worth checking out.
I believe Jeff plays for Kalani now, actually.
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
yeah, it's just really funny. Incredible slacky guitarist, if you're not familiar.
yeah,
Um, and I guess before I just want to touch on this because national identity I think is really important. Um, and when I was studying my family history and I found out, hey, my family's in Puna, I reached out to Leighton and who happens to be first cousins with um, Kaui Doodle. So there, which is very interesting. And unfortunately, my email doesn't work very well in Puna because the internet out there is it's a little rural. But we found out and there's a book called Under the Volcano um, that I would recommend. It's an orange book if any of my relatives are watching, that kind of map out like where the Pe'a state was. Because the Mahele, like I think a lot of Hawaiians want to know where their land was. I think that's a big question. And I
yeah,
think the Kauai petitions are a really good resource in finding that out because they say where they were only 4 years after the supposed overthrow, where they lived, right? They signed in Puna. A lot of times they're signing where they are. They're not going to
yeah.
go to a different island.
It's all organized by district, by
Yep.
island and district and gender.
Yep.
Yeah,
And when I learned that, I found out uh, that my family's estate was in Kaimu, where Wicked Games, the music video, there's a lava flow that comes through and destroys. And they actually use the lava flow in their romantic scenes of steamy, romance. Um, and then the the music video shows the beach getting destroyed, but it was the same area, and I thank Chief of War again because they had paved the roads, so I was able to take my son to our family estate, and that's where they filmed the last episode of Chief of War, the Black Desert.
Oh, which is amazing.
Which, yeah, oh my gosh, and the chanting back and forth, and I
Yeah,
felt like I was
yeah,
doing that yesterday, and I apologize to that kumu, but that came out from California that may not have understood what McKinley meant to our people, and why I would be upset that our culture wasn't being proudly displayed, maybe in a fashion of that Kalakaua would want, um, in an opera or some other form, but the McKinley Art Center, I just felt kuleana after everything I've learned. Um, to Onipa'a and Kue, which I normally don't do. I'm not the loud. I'm usually not. That's Kalani's job, right? To be loud, he could sing, but I challenge any artist out there or actor really to support. I mean, if Chief of War could do it and release something that big on July 31st, to consider creating venues, music videos, songs, Mele about July 31st or November 28th, challenge the Polynesian Cultural Center to save space on those days for Hawaiians and that body. The University of Reno with Deborah Harry would agree that we would challenge allowing, because I think there was another podcast where Governor Green was asked about Hawaiian sovereignty.
right.
Um, and he said something like, "Oh, if you believe, if you identify," but it's kind of getting to that legal realm where I don't think it kind of transcends belief. Either it exists or it doesn't.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, he's a doctor, not a lawyer. Right.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but most of them are lawyers.
Yeah. But big shout out to Keep It Aloha podcast for
Mm.
having, because I even challenged them. I said, are you guys going to do a podcast? I believe it was Lāhui Ea, which you helped me celebrate, or La Kuokoa, with my ohana. And I thank you for that. Everybody learned so much from you. But he had he was I asked him, I said, hey, in the comments, like, could you do something to highlight what the Hawaiian Kingdom was and why this day is important? And he did. He reached out to Dr. Kianusai, who actually
Yeah,
attended Kamehameha schools with his mother. So this connection he didn't know about, right? Until he had him on the show. And I might have that as a link below just to kind of learn more. I think that was a really in-depth, very balanced questioning. Um, but to have the courage to ask the governor, right? Josh
yeah,
Green,
yeah.
straight up.
I give him credit.
Me too. Yeah, hats off, hats off. Um, just like Aki and everyone else that's kind of learning this history to ask the hard question of where is the Treaty of Cession and what does that mean for me?
Yeah, if I could leave your viewers and listeners with a last message, I would say, because we talked in the past about well, one of the things was being just educated enough to be dangerous, right?
Right. Yes.
Um, but how do you go past that to where you're educated enough where you're uh, a benefit to the community, right?
Mm,
It's not really that easy. Um, I don't know that the university model is very sustainable with the price of tuitions and then the amount
mm,
of time you have to take off from normal life. So I've been thinking a lot about popular education and things like podcasts. And in that spirit, I started another website. So the Umiverse, my
right.
blog, which took off way more than I ever expected. It has over 310,000 views.
Sheesh.
When I spoke in January, it was 298,000, and just since then, that's how much it's
That's
looked. I
incredible.
mentioned that is because the media wasn't giving us information, right? They didn't talk about the overthrow
Mm-mm.
on the 17th, so people searched Google and found my blog. That's how it all started.
Oh,
And so there's the Umiverse, which is pretty well established, but then there's a new site that I started called the Umiversity. And
oh,
that is sort of like a curated education. If you don't have time and you don't have funds, then school is not practical in the
mm,
traditional ways. You can kind of go here and just read every day a
right.
short article, and I kind of take people on what I consider to be a good rounded education at the kind of above high school level. But you don't have to come to the university, but I think event efforts like that we need to
Right.
develop to get the people to the level where Kamehameha the Third wanted to see them, right? A nation of learning. He Lahui Pala Pala Ko'u, as he put it. I like to translate it as mine is a nation of learning, but there's other ways to say it. But
And how old was he when he
what
said
you're
this?
doing is
Yeah.
along those lines, and the only thing I don't like is when I see foreigners making content that says, "You probably didn't know Hawaii was illegally overthrown," and then they
Oh gosh,
it's
yeah.
like let the Hawaiians tell their own story. You know,
Mm.
that's my feeling.
I've always wanted to see, because you know how you can do a side by side now, where you have a film kind of, and then an actual Hawaiian historian that speaks the Hawaiian language. Pick
Mm,
these videos apart. I think you'd have a lot of content to work with.
yeah.
So, if you know better or know more, I encourage the Lahui and PhDs even to just engage in a couple of them, right? Film yourself and what really happened according to the primary source documents and just an idea. But it's an idea I've had that I just didn't have time to do. But I think the quote that you said, "Hey palapala, hey aupuni palapala ko'u," um, and I want to thank Dr. Umi because this is not the first time he's actually done this. This is the second time. So a little candor here. When we did it the last time, the recording button wasn't pressed properly. So I apologize. So he's actually made twi time not only for my family once during a Hawaiian holiday, um, twice to refilm this. So I have tremendous gratitude for you being willing to meet again. I mahalo you with the deepest gratitude again for answering some of these challenging questions and the candor that you have, and for your patience. I was just challenged maybe a month ago by someone dear and close to me that was that told me, it's time you do a podcast, and um, the there was a first guest we had was Kale Gomopak.
Mm,
Who's a direct descendant of David Malo. And
oh,
it's, again, I think the theme of the show is going to be David Malo, um, this quote where, don't let other people tell your history. And why not hear Hawaiian history from Hawaiian scholars that read Hawaiian and, the most literate country in the 19th century. So I challenge my viewers to reach out to people like Umi Perkins for more opportunities, more platforms for them to get their work out, so that we can challenge these narratives that are popping up because we don't do this for views. We're doing this for our family lines and our understanding of who we are in the world, or who we are in this Umiverse. So there's my plug to you. I really appreciate your time, and thank you again. So hopefully malama pono and ahui ho. Thank you again.
well, I'd like to thank you for your all your efforts. I can see that there's passion behind it, and it's kind of nonstop from my perspective, and I really appreciate it. Um, and mahalo for having me. I'm happy to do
Absolutely.
it.
Mahalo nui loa. Malama pono from the Hawaiian Kingdom podcast. If viewers want more information, I'll include links and bios, as many as I can, for this podcast to encourage you to further your research with Dr. Perkins. Thank you again for your time.
Okay, mahalo nui.
Evelina mai kako, and welcome to the Hawaiian Kingdom podcast. Evelina mai kako, and welcome